Great to be here again in University of Maryland, the first place ever gave me an academic position, and I really thanks Shimon to bringing me back here. In the last session, there was a question asked from the audience about common knowledge among Middle Eastern scholars that Jews in Arab countries, and especially in Morocco, were actually incited to move to Israel. They never were kicked out, and they left because the state of Israel incited them to leave because they needed cheap labor. I must say that I was living for a few years in Teaneck, New Jersey, trying to incite good Jews to move to Israel, and it was not very successful. And whenever, in the assumption of this question is that, between Jews and Arabs, they had just great time in Morocco, and the Israelis just incite them to leave. And when you have great time, incitement is not very successful. So I will go now in my talk to go into details about those two countries, Tunisia and Morocco, and to explain why, by the end, the majority of the Jews left those countries. So first of all, we need to look about the numbers mentioned here in a few paper before, but Jews from Islamic countries were about 10% of Jewish people in 1948. When we look into the details of how many Jews in each country, we see that the biggest communities, about 2/3 of Jews in Islamic countries live in 4 countries. Among them, 3 of them are French North Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. And with the Iraqi Jews, it comes to be the 2/3 of the Jews of Islamic country, of the 1 million forgotten Jews. Now, that's the numbers of Jews moving to Israel immediately after its establishment, what we call the mass immigration between 1948 and 1951. You can see the numbers. The biggest countries are Iraq, mentioned here before, and will be mentioned more, Romania and Poland. French North Africa, that's in Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, actually are a small percent. And if we look into these details, the Jews of the Maghreb are 50% of the Jews in the Islamic world. The Jews from the Islamic countries are 50% of the mass immigration to Israel. However, looking in this mass immigration into details, we see that North African Jews are only 7% of this immigration. So actually, they did not come to Israel after Israel was established. They came later on. Looking in those charts, we see again, among the 4 biggest community of the Islamic world, only the Iraqi community had 95% of immigration, and the North African communities are in the lowest part of the numbers of how many Jews had left. You see Morocco with 12% of the Jews who left, Tunisia with 7%, Algeria, completely another story, with 1%, and only Lebanon, from another story, is in the 4 countries on the bottom of this chart. So definitely, the leaving North Africa was not the question of establishing the state of Israel. And the reason why Jews left North Africa is a different one. Why did the Jews of North Africa were not part of the mass immigration? Was the mass immigration involved basically Jews in countries where they were in danger, like Yemen, or their liberty was endangered, like Eastern Europe, communist countries, and the French authorities actually gave kind of security to Jews in North Africa. Israel, as mentioned before, prevented in some way, and I wrote a book about it, of the Jews of North Africa to come to Israel, and they themselves were hesitating about coming to Israel. Some of them did arrive to Israel in 1949 and felt such a prejudice against them, so they came back to Morocco. In 1952, Morocco is the second country in the number of Israelis leaving Israel and going elsewhere. So Israelis were leaving to Canada and to Morocco, not to the US. 1952, the door closed here. Under French administration, actually the immigration from Tunisia and Morocco was coordinated by the Jewish agency with the French authorities. I'm not speaking now about Algeria. Algerian Jews are French Jews, equal citizen, completely free move. They don't need to coordinate with anybody to go wherever they want. But Tunisia and Morocco, the Jews there were residents or citizens of the local authorities, and there was a kind of coordination between the Jewish agency and the local French authorities. But among those communities, there was a fear. What will happen after the French will leave? As Shlomo Zalman Shragai, you see him here in the picture, said, look, now, and he's speaking in 1954, we regret we lost the opportunity to save the Jews of Syria and Egypt. As Yaron mentioned, the Jews of Syria were lost. Israel could not get to them. They could not get to Israel. I am concerned that we will lose the Jews of French North Africa. This country will soon become independent. Independent states will not let the Jews live like others independent Arab states, and he was thinking about Egypt and Syria. And what happened, in one end of the globe is a butterfly moving his wings, and in the other end, the earth is crashing. So when the French are losing to the Viet Cong in Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam, all French colonial colonies feel, okay, the French are weak. This is the time to hit them. And the struggle for independence in the Maghreb is intensifying. And most Jews in Morocco and Tunisia are expecting that in the worst case, if Morocco and Tunisia will become Yemen and Iraq, the state of Israel will adopt the same policy it adopted in Yemen and Iraq. It will bring them on eagle wings. And why they were so afraid of the independent Arab countries? The assumption was that the Arab League, the union between Arab countries, will forbid immigration because Jews who are immigrating to Israel are enforcing Israel, enforcing its military force, and this force is against Arab countries. And many Israelis and Zionists argued that what happened in Iraq, that the government actually forced out all the Jews, will not happen again. And Jews who will be staying in Arab countries will be stuck there. And some, not only Israelis thought that. I bring a British diplomat who said, look, the Moroccan independent movement is very religious, and it will identify with the Arab Leagues, and the Moroccan Jews have an important part in Morocco economy, and if all the Jews will leave, it will harm the Moroccan economy, and for this reason they will ban Moroccan immigration. And some say that even in Tunisia, although it's different, the place that Jews have in the economy will bring the government to prevent their immigration. And it's not an accusation. One of the party of independence in Morocco, Parti Démocratique d'Indépendants, said that Aliyah, immigration to Israel, is a crime against Moroccan people, and the party called the Jews to liberate themselves from their tendency to flee the country. I mentioned Tunisia, that there was the same fear, although less, and those analyses caused Jews to vote with their feet. Okay? As the struggle of independence in Tunisia and Morocco intensified, more and more Jews registered for Aliyah. One may say, no, it's not the same thing. Jews were kicked out in Iraq, while Jews in Morocco and Tunisia were, forced to stay. But actually it's the same thing, because if your liberty of immigration is forbidden or prevented, it's exactly like being expelled. You are afraid that what will be happen next, and you want to leave this country before the door will be closed. And so from this, it's actually the same politics. Kicking out Jews and preventing them to leave come from the same place and had the same influence on the Jews. And like many other countries, the El-Wafak, the Jews that are part of the Istiklal, the Independence Party of Morocco, were mentioned here. It was like 200 Jews among 250,000 Jews, but very influenced. They say, look, for us, it's better that Jews will never think and talk about Aliyah, because we want the Jews to identify like American Jews and French Jews to be Moroccan Jews, very Moroccan patriot. And they were the first speaking loudly against Aliyah and saying in every occasion, Jews should stop going to Aliyah. Leon Ben Zaken was mentioned here. He was the Jewish minister in the first Moroccan government. Morocco received its independence in March 1956, Tunisia as well. And he said, look, for a while, I'm asking the Jewish agency, stop working for Aliyah. Jews here need to have a leave for Aliyah to integrate in the country. And he was putting pressure on an organization like the OZ, that it's a Jewish organization for health, not to work with the Jewish agency and not to help Jews prepare themselves for Aliyah. And Jewish doctors and middle-class Jews were afraid, and they actually stopped working with the Jewish agency. By the way, when Morocco joined the Arab Leagues in 1958, Ben Zaken was no more a minister in the Moroccan cabinet, and all attitude changed. So the Moroccan closed the doors immediately when they had the opportunity to do so, when the responsibility for issuing passports moved from the French authorities to the Moroccan authorities. The collective passport, that was the way of the Jewish agency to bring together 3,000 Jews in one paper, was stopped, and Jewish agency workers were forced out from Morocco, and there was a kind of a negotiation to help the Jews that were already in the immigration camps near Casablanca to leave. But in this time, there were 100,000 Moroccan Jews registered in Jewish Agency Bureau waiting for Aliyah. They didn't came because Israel had a policy that nothing would happen, and Israel didn't accelerate the Aliyah from Morocco like it did in Iraq and Yemen, and 100,000 Jews were stuck in Morocco. The Moroccans say we are not preventing immigration. We're not preventing emigration. Every Jew who wants to leave Morocco can ask for a passport. But actually, very few Jews received passport. And if we are looking for the first 2 years, 2,000 Jews received passport for 2 years, while before independence, 2,500 Jews were leaving every month. In some months, 3,500 Jews. So definitely the Moroccan independence government saying every Jew can leave was not the real story. What happened after 1958, when we see here the King Muhammad V with his BFF Abdel Nasser, best friend forever. They were not so best friends as mentioned before, but he joined the Arab League and Nasser came to Casablanca, and from now on Jews could not leave at all Morocco. And they were actually jailed behind an iron curtain. So an operation of clandestine immigration run out by the Israelis' secret services with the Jewish agency start to operate. They forge passports. They smuggle Jews to the independent Spanish town on the shore of Morocco. And finally, they also bought some small boats to smuggle Jews out from isolated beaches in Morocco to Gibraltar. It's a short way, and the Moroccan authorities do not allow Jews to leave. Let's smuggle them out. It was a very dangerous operation. Moroccan security services were trying to find them, arrest them, jail them, and it was a very expensive operation. Every Jew cost a lot of money to the Israeli government, and actually the number of Jews who could leave Morocco in this way was numerous. Not a lot of people could have forged passport, could smuggle the borders, and so on. And when we summarize the numbers in 5 years of this clandestine operation, 18,000 Jews left Morocco. Just to mention that the year before Morocco received independence, 36,000 Jews left in 1 year. So it was definitely a decline of number of Jews who could leave Morocco. After the tragic incidents with the pips, or egoz in Hebrew, the small ship that smuggled Jews from Morocco in January 1961, and it drowned. 44 Jews on this ship died, and illegal immigration stopped for a while. An international pressure was put on the Moroccan government to allow Jews to leave, and the king dies. Vive le roi, the new king arrived with a lot of pride and international pressure. He allowed Jews to live in a semi-legal immigration. Nobody is saying that we are leaving to Israel. No paper is writing about this immigration. No Jewish agency, State of Israel bodies are working with those immigrants, and it is done by international Jewish organizations like HIAS. And for the next 3 years, those 100,000 Jews registered for Aliyah in 1956 were able to leave. And as mentioned before, Jews realized it's not our home anymore. And although in 1965 there were still 70,000 Jews in Morocco, they moved slowly for different reasons. And today Morocco is perhaps the biggest Jewish community in the Arab world. There were about 2,500, 4,000 Jews in Morocco, and this is the community of 265,000 Jews in 1948. The story of Tunisia is a little bit different, and I have 4 minutes, so I go about it quick, but the leader of Tunisian struggle for independence, Habib Bourguiba, was a poor Western secular leader, and he said, I don't want to argue with the world about letting Jews living out, and I will let the Jews. And actually, Jewish agency activity continued in independent Tunisia for a while. In November 1956, because of the war in the Middle East, the Egyptian ambassador said, how can you allow Tunisian Jews to come to Israel and fight against Egypt? So he forbid the Jews to go to Israel, and actually he stopped the Aliyah for a while. After the Egyptian ambassador left his office, he renewed the immigration to Israel and say it's not an immigration, they're not Tunisian citizen anymore. Instead of a passport, they gave them a laissez-passer, a document that allowed them, they are not a Tunisian citizen anymore, and they are not moving to Israel, they are just emigrating from Tunisia. He knew that they are moving to Israel, it was okay for him. This pause influenced the Tunisian Jews not to be so close to the Jewish agency and not to be involved in those things that, are perhaps harming them. And for different reasons, Jews in Tunisia felt very comfortable in those years. And the demand for Aliyah was slow and small, and it was not such a pressure on the Tunisian government to stop Aliyah. 1961 was a turning point, a conflict between Tunisia and France surrounding the issue of the port of Bizerte was influencing the Jews in Tunisia, and I won't get into the details, but I think the way we need to look about it is a story a friend told me. She said, my father was an engineer in the Tunisian electric company during the French administration. When the French left, the Tunisian government authorities asked him to train a worker of him, a Muslim worker, to become also one of the, I don't know, in the management of the electrical society. And I trained him. And after a while, this Muslim Tunisian guy was promoted to be equivalent with the father of my friend. And after a few more months, he was promoted to be his boss. And then he realized that the next step is kicking me out, and we are leaving for France now. And they left to France as refugees. They didn't have French passport or French citizenship and didn't want to go to Israel. She finally found herself in Israel, but she said, we realize that it's not our home anymore. And I think that this is the story that, going around the Jews of Tunisia, and the same thing happened in Tunisia as well. Slowly but steady, all the Jews, as Chaim Saddon mentioned this morning, left. Thank you very much.